Welcome to another episode of Faith Explorations, the podcast where we delve deep into the teachings and principles of Christianity and embark on a transformative journey through the realms of faith and spirituality. I'm your host, Kenneth Garcia. In episode 32, we are diving deep into a question that many of us have pondered at some point in our lives. Does God hear the prayers of sinners? Let's explore this thought and shed some light on what scriptures have to say about it. But our exploration doesn't end here. For more insights that can enrich your journey of faith, be sure to visit us at BibleKeeper.com. So without further ado, let's dive in. As humans, we are all sinners by nature, but when faced with challenges, we often wonder why it seems like God ignores our prayers while seemingly favoring others. So, does God hear the prayers of sinners? Now, this thought is not uncommon, even among the people of faith we find in the Bible. Let's take David, a devout man after God's own heart, for example. He cried out in Psalm chapter 13, verse 1, "How long, O Lord?" Similarly, the prophet Habakkuk in Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 2 asked, "Lord, how long will I call for aid, and you will not hear?" Why do we sometimes perceive God's silence as a lack of hearing? Does God turn a deaf ear to a sinner's prayer? Or does God have greater plans and motives that we might not fully understand? Let's start by examining the verse from John chapter 9, verse 31, which states, "Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshipper of God and doeth his will, he heareth." Numerous instances in the scripture seem to imply that God does not hear sinners. However, this assertion is subject to certain conditions. While there are instances where God seems to refuse to hear sinners, there are countless verses that prove otherwise, indicating that God does indeed listen to the prayers of sinners. So, it is erroneous to believe that God never hears the prayers of sinners. You might wonder if God is omniscient. Does he not hear everything, including the prayers of unbelievers and sinners? The Bible provides several examples of God responding to the prayers of unbelievers. For instance, in Jonah chapter 3, verses 5 to 10, the people of Nineveh repented and prayed to God, and he spared the city from destruction. Similarly, in the New Testament, specifically in Acts chapter 10, we find the story of Cornelius, a Roman centurion who prayed to the God of the Jews, and God responded by sending Peter to proclaim the gospel to him and his household. So, while John chapter 9, verse 31 suggests that God does not hear sinners, it appears that there is an exception. God does hear the prayers of those who seek salvation. Now, let's dive deeper into the meaning of the word "hear" in this context. God is omniscient and omnipotent, meaning he hears everything that happens in the universe. Psalms chapter 139, verse 4 says, "For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether." Additionally, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 13 states, "And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account." However, there are instances in the Bible where God states that he will not hear or react to certain prayers. Isaiah chapter 59, verses 1 to 2 explains that God's refusal to hear comes not from a limitation on his part, but from the separation caused by human iniquities and sins. For example, in Isaiah chapter 59, verses 3 to 4, God points out that he will not hear the prayers of those whose hands are defiled with blood, whose lips have spoken lies, and who trust in empty words and speak lies. This leads us to consider the definition of a sinner. As Romans chapter 3, verse 23 says, "All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." So, in a sense, we are all sinners. But when we talk about whether God hears the prayers of sinners, we need to consider the nature of the sin and the individual's attitude towards God. There are different kinds of sinners mentioned in the Bible. Some are rebellious and reject God's will, while others may still occasionally sin but actively seek God and obey his commandments. The distinction is crucial because, as we've seen in Isaiah chapter 59, it's not merely about being a sinner, but about living in disobedience and rebellion against God. It's about how one feels and acts towards God that determines whether their prayers are heard. Now, you might be wondering if there are practical ways to approach prayer as a sinner. The answer is yes. No matter our sinful nature, God is always willing to hear our prayers and desires a personal relationship with us. One way to approach prayer is by seeking God's presence and understanding that His love is unwavering, despite our shortcomings. Embracing God's forgiveness is also crucial, acknowledging our need for forgiveness and embracing the grace offered through Jesus' sacrifice. Submitting to God's authority, humbly recognizing His power over all things, and seeking Jesus' example in prayer can guide us in developing a transformative connection with God. Embracing God's absolute truth and relying on His power to transform lives can also enrich our prayer life. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Faith Explorations. Remember that God's promises are universal, and He invites us to seek Him with all our hearts. Whether we are sinners seeking salvation or believers seeking a deeper connection, God hears and responds to our earnest prayers. If you enjoyed today's discussion and want to explore more topics related to spirituality, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, and visit us at BibleKeeper.com for more resources that will enrich your faith journey. Join us next time as we continue to explore matters of faith and spirituality. Until then, may God bless you abundantly.